Wayne did an album about a month ago. I don't know what it was, 19,000.
Yeah.
I seen Puff did an album, the Love album, with everybody named Mama on there, 23,000. Ross and Meek, 30,000. NBA, 30,000. Kodak Black, 10,000. Trippie Redd, 10,000.
Our goats are falling off. Multiple generations are losing interest. And there are less and less big records. It's not looking too good for hip-hop. It's looking like it might be on its last legs. We say that every 10 years though. So what's so different about this time? Well, with the impending disappearance of our big three, a noticeable decline in support and creativity from consumers and from labels, and a steady decline in the streaming numbers for the genre as a whole, it's not looking too promising for the music that we love so dearly. Now, think of any era in hip-hop. You can almost always pinpoint, 3 to 5 figureheads who were leading the charge and pushing the genre forward. And those people would always be cycled out by the next generation that, kind of sneaks in and shows a little bit of promise. There's always been a group of leaders in every era. The 90s, the 2000s, the crunk era, the snap era, the rise of autotune, the 2010s, the rise of trap music and backpack rap. Some generations were more stacked than others, of course, but there was always a genuine hope for the future. Okay, now with that being said, gun to the back of your head right now. Name 5 rappers that can take over after this big 3 is gone.
What y'all talking about, bro? You're dying! You're literally dying!
Let's say by some miracle, you pulled out 5 names out your ass. If you sent this to somebody else with no context and you had them pick 5, today, more likely than not, they'd pick a different 5 than you chose. But 10 years ago, every list would include one of these 3, or probably all of these 3. It seems like there's an S tier, and then everybody else is just fighting an A. Drake's turning 40, Kendrick's turning 40, Cole's turning 40. They're aging out, and it's sad to say, but as it is right now, hip-hop is a young man's sport.
Extraordinary, the door is extraordinary, till they turn astronomical and non-phenomenal, the non-abominable, mindable, and the abdominable, punch him in the stomach, up on his dominoes, domino, eating a pizza, and I don't want no dominoes.
I couldn't tell you the reason why, but for some reason, there's a time limit on rappers as soon as they get into the game. And the older you are when you finally make it, the quicker that they try to get you out. I guess because there's so much relation from hip-hop culture to pop culture that relating to, us that's pushing 30 and above isn't as cool anymore. But we didn't make hip-hop pop culture. Pop culture just adopted hip-hop. We didn't ask for that. There's so many other genres where people are celebrated as they get older, and we look forward to how aging, influences their craft and their art. But not for hip-hop. Over several years, hip-hop has steadily inclined with the help of a couple of people that, I may or may not have talked about before. But everybody played their part. And hip-hop, for a long time, has been the leading music and culture in the US. Starting in the 90s and 2000s, and then, finding its peak in 2017, when hip-hop finally bloomed, blossomed, flourished, taking over billboards, awards, and media in general. But what was so attractive? I'd like to think it was the art, real creativity, poetry, the sample nature of just taking various different styles and improving upon it, the cool factor of being associated with, the counterculture of being a Black American. But what does hip-hop look like right now? From 2021 to 2023, all while the streaming numbers for the whole industry have been reaching record highs. Hip-hop's market share has been going down steadily. 28%, 27%, 26%. Something's going wrong. Shit. Nowadays, the fight for listenership for our major label artists is not as successful as it used to be. Maybe it's because the novelty's gone, or maybe originality and creativity isn't what sells records anymore. At least not for mainstream artists. And these two problems go hand in hand, actually. I've spoken about the lacking originality from the TikTok social media angle before. But there's another major problem. We're in sample hell.
Bitches won't be this, cause always that. Niggas say they rich, let's keep it a step. I love when you do that step. Pretty face, small weight with your feet in the air.
Hip hop comes from sampling. So it makes a lot of sense to, continue doing that as it's a major part of the culture. But we've completely discarded the idea of making the songs better, or at least different enough to make sense. Nowadays, we're dropping 5 or 6 remixes of the same 7 songs that we all used to love 10, 20 years ago. It's not making sense, man. I'm not vibing with that. And honestly, that's more of the industry's fault. Because there's talent out there. But we're stuck in a single culture that prioritizes, cash grabs, just make as much money as you can as quickly as possible. And then we'll figure out the rest later. Longevity is just an afterthought. Just continue making hits, and I guess forever you'll stay relevant. Today's hip-hop is really just made to get as wide of an audience as possible. And that's a great way to make some money, but it's not necessarily a good way to keep people emotionally invested. And so we end up with flyby artists every 2 or 3 years, and then we just recycle them in and out, new, old, just based off of what have you done for me lately. But nobody's here to stay. Like, how many of these songs will we be playing in 20 years? I don't know. How many artists right now would you say are album artists? Or are they just stringing together a compilation of hot singles? And that's exactly the problem we're having right now. Or at least the problem I'm having. The death of the album is definitely something I'm going to cover at length later, because I'm a person that loves a good cohesive body of work. And I don't think I've heard one in a long time from, mainstream artists outside of the big 3. And even sometimes in the big 3, it's a little shaky, but I'm not gonna say too much about that. But I guess this is where we have to talk about what our support of the genre looks like in the next couple of years. Because even though our mainstream artists may or may not be doing what needs to be done in the underground, there's about 100 or so people that are actually doing it right, but just don't have the support to make it to that next level. So technically, hip-hop as an art form isn't dying, but the mainstream aspect of it, where the art was actually on the forefront at times, is definitely close to done. There's always going to be up-and-coming, craft-focused people, and we as consumers, or we as the decision makers, or we as French, just got to figure out what it is that we're supporting. Whether or not that's music that sounds like what, hip-hop used to sound like, or that's music that sounds like the future. Whatever it is, we're straying away from both of them right now, so it's time to make a decision. Our next generation is looking more like the rock rap, the synth, the more experimental, version of hip-hop, which I honestly love myself. But we can't stay attached to I Bomb Atomically, Socrates Philosophies, and High Prophecies. We can't do it anymore, even though I love that song too. That's just not what hip-hop is sounding like, at least in this next era. But everything's cyclical, so maybe it'll come back. The sound is developing, and we have to develop with it. But with that being said, what do you think? Is hip-hop going downhill, or is the underground going to carry it? Are we too focused on one sound? And most importantly to me, what do you think caused the death of the concept album? And do you really care? Even if you don't, we're going to talk about it. Like, comment, subscribe, Tan.